fight on, Bradley. March right down the field. Foes may press you, foes may even stress you. We will never yield. Fight for alma mater. Plunge right through to victory. March on, Bradley. Fight for varsity. B-R-A-D-L-E-Y. Go Bradley! Yeah! Give yourself a round of applause. At least you recognized one word. I'm surprised more of you didn't join in. How many of you have lived in Peoria for more than a minute? And you don't know the Bradley fight song? You could say I was a die-hard Bradley fan. I went to every home game of almost every sport, and I especially love basketball. Maybe some of you young women don't know, but at the turn of the last century, women's basketball was more popular than men's basketball, and twice as hot. It was so much fun. But I did love those Bradley Braves, the men's basketball team in particular. If it was an away game close, I would go, but usually I listened on the radio, if it were on the radio, and it was always on the radio. And I'll never forget, February 10th, 1951. I was just at home right down the hill here, and Bradley was playing in St. Louis. At that point in the season, they won 23 out of 27 games. They were on their way to the championship. And in that game, they so dominated the first 3 quarters. Matter of fact, with 8 minutes left, Bradley was 17 points ahead. And then 2 bad calls. Technical fouls. So, of course, St. Louis took the easy free throw, and then Bradley missed an easy layup, and St. Louis they turnover, they scored again, and we were losing our lead, and I was on my feet shouting at the radio, and I felt a pain in my left shoulder. My left arm went numb, and I could hear the shouting on the radio, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. I lost consciousness. I fell to the floor. I died of a heart attack listening to a Bradley game. Go Braves! Don't pity me. I was 88 years old. I had a good run. I was doing what I loved. But I never heard. How did the game end? Any of you know? February 10th, 1951, Bradley versus St. Louis. Oh, maybe I don't want to know. It wasn't going well. But did I mention I was a diehard Bradley fan? I love Bradley. I actually knew Lydia Moss Bradley. I was in my 20s, but I was there at the ribbon cutting. Her husband, and my parents were actually friends. And you know, in a town of 5,000 people, the business leaders knew each other. Maybe you knew. Her husband ran a bank, and when he passed, she took his seat on the board, and she was one of the first female bank executives, not just in Illinois, but in the country. She was a dynamic woman. And we love Bradley. My parents, they immigrated here in 1849. Both my parents, Benjamin Foster, I'm Edgar Foster, born in 1863. It was the depths of the Civil War. And I was too young to enlist as an infant, and my dad was too old. But my parents both came from England, Benjamin Foster and Christina Foster. They'd married in Kent, and they came here in 1849. And as I mentioned, in 1849, Peoria was a town of 5,095 people. And the last census in 1950, 111,856. Peoria had grown that much in my lifetime. It was amazing. And of course, in those early days, my parents knew Lydia Moss and her husband, and my dad was actually one of the first manufacturers in Peoria. He came from England with skills, with talent, and drive. He was a bookmaker and printer and bookbinder. But when he arrived in Peoria, he saw a need, and he founded the Peoria Paper Board Company, making what you call corrugated cardboard boxes. He made boxes for everything from candy to buttons. And Peoria manufactured a lot of buttons in those days. And Peoria grew, and my father's business grew with it. Which troubles me because it took my parents 7 years before they could get citizenship. Why do we make it so hard for immigrants to get citizenship when we know we are a nation of immigrants? I can tell from looking at you, none of you are full-blood American Indian. You are all descended from one wave or another. These immigrants come with skills and eagerness, and I don't know the math, but how many of you work for a company that was founded by an immigrant? Many of us. In 1870, when I began working for my dad's plant, we were buying 35 tons of paperboard a year, and we employed 10 people. When I took over the company in 1878, my dad retired, and we were a major manufacturer because Peoria was building all kinds of things, and we were shipping them all over the world. That river gives us access to the world. And I do believe that immigrants are more patriotic often than people like myself who are lucky enough to be born here. We take these rights for granted. But my dad from England, as a bookmaker in some countries, maybe not England, if he printed the wrong thing, he could lose his life. And many of you who have English ancestors came here for freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. And when you lose freedom of speech, you lose the rest of them pretty quickly. To give you an idea how patriotic my father was, most immigrants, he named my oldest brother Benjamin Franklin Foster. And my baby brother, any guesses? Close. Abraham Lincoln Foster. You don't get any more patriotic than that. The war had just ended when my little brother was born, and Lincoln had just lost his life. And sadly, my brother didn't live much past 2. And Ben, he died at 23, and that's why I inherited the company. And when I took over, I bought out some of my competitors, and I expanded. I built a new plant. And if you eat at Alexander Steakhouse, I built that building in 1910 when I expanded to the United Paperboard Company. I actually bought a plant over in Champaign as well. In Champaign, they were still using wheat straw. Maybe you don't know, what we call corrugated cardboard often used wheat straw because the long fibers are strong and lightweight. And when you shred those fibers and press them into paperboard, it makes a lightweight and sturdy corrugated cardboard. Prior to that, everything was shipped in barrels. And you know, a keg of nails, a flour barrel. You literally could buy a buttload of anything because a butt is a certain size barrel. If it's some of that fine Peoria whiskey, it's 126 gallons. That would be a buttload of whiskey. I was part of the turnaround from straw to paper and corrugated cardboard, and the company kept growing. When I was ready to retire in 1933, I sold to the Terre Haute Paper Company, and sadly, a few years later, they shut down the plant here in Peoria, but that wasn't my problem. I had already retired. And Alexander's moved in, so I'm happy about that. I love a good steak, but I want them to grill it for me, okay? And I became a full-time Bradley fan. Did I mention I went to every home game? It was about that time that my sisters and I put our heads together. I had 3 sisters. Mary was a little older than I, and she was married. But Amanda, my younger sister, she never married. She was a clerk and an accountant for one of the local companies, and she and my other sisters were very much involved in helping women get the right to vote. Girls, thank your grandma that you have that right. And how many of you women take advantage of that right? Yes. My sisters and I often discussed that if women had the right to vote, it might change the tone and tenor of the debate. My sister helped to found the League of Women Voters. and was the treasurer for the Peoria chapter, which organizes civil debates, emphasis on civil. We're not just the two parties, but independents and everybody's welcome. Because we believe that an educated public makes better decisions. Actually, I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said you need to learn the responsibilities as well as your rights and duties for this democracy to thrive. And Herbert Hoover, who I voted for, he was a progressive Republican. And actually, I believe Hoover won the White House because it was the first time women had the right to vote. And they voted for him in a landslide. It was both an electoral college and a popular vote landslide. Hoover said, our democracy thrives on the feet of well-fed and well-educated and happy children. Hoover proved food can and did win the war. In World War I, he was not an elected official, but he was appointed the food czar, and he contracted with farmers across the country to feed our allies. Even before we had men in the game, we fed our allies and turned the tide in World War I. And Hoover wisely knew that these mothers at home, whose sons were on foreign battlefields, wanted to do something. So he created Meatless Mondays and Wheatless Wednesdays, so these mothers could feel like, and not just feel like, they were doing something constructive to feed their boys overseas. Women, League of Women Voters. My sister, maybe she'll come next year and she'll tell her story. You should hear it from her. But anyhow, my sisters and I, that was a tangent, we were beginning to talk about what we were going to do with our inheritance. They shared in our parents' wealth, and I gave them shares of the company when I retired. And I'm from a generation, maybe you agree, that men of means have a duty to our community. Our wealth was built on the labor of our neighbors. And what did we want to do before we left this world? Education. And I think you would agree, Bradley is the premier institute of higher learning in Peoria. And what is the heart of a university? The library. As the president of the Friends of Bradley Library, I did my homework. At that time, the library was actually scattered in various buildings, in the basement of a dorm, in the science building. And as a student, you had to go here and hither and thither to find the books you wanted. But I did my homework, and I proved that even though it was not the most useful library, we had more hours of student studying in the library per capita than any other university in the Midwest of a similar size. Bradley still is training the leaders in our community. The health of our community and our country depends on education. So after my sisters and I were talking about it, we decided to add a few zeros to our donation. And I made the single largest donation to Bradley ever since Lydia Moss had founded and endowed the school. $37,500. But we put in one stipulation. The community had to match it. Times 3. Can you do that math? I'll do it for you. I love math. $112,500. And Peoria rose up and exceeded our expectations. Because we just didn't want to build a building. We wanted to make sure it was endowed and fully equipped to continue to train the next generation. And that's what I want to be remembered for. Not a building, but the idea that I left this world better when I left it. Can I ask a favor? Can I make a request from the grave?
Oh, yes you can.
Thank you. Even though I'm dead, will you prove to me philanthropy is not? Fight on, Bradley, march right down the field. B-R-A-D-L-E-Y, go Bradley! Yeah! Thank you for listening. And I will will say Mother Slough is right down the road. When my parents moved here, my childhood home was 111 Main Street, right near the riverfront, right around the corner from Mother Slough's Tavern. They arrived shortly before us, and I'm sure my parents had dinner at the tavern when they first arrived. And she's got a delightful story right around the bend. Thank you for listening.
You are awesome, man.
Thank you.